Hello, everybody, people around the world who are interested in the politics and issues concerning Macedonia, and by that extension, the Balkans and Europe. Today, I'm having a conversation with Goce Pangovski. Goce is a Macedonian expatriate living in the United States. Although his formal education is not in history, he's a great enthusiast for Macedonian history and the history of the neighboring countries of Macedonia. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time in presenting you. Maybe you can tell us a few words about yourself to tell Macedonians and everybody else who is interested to understand the condition in which Macedonia is found in the past 2 years, 2.5 years, which results from the Bulgarian veto on Macedonia's negotiation with the EU. We should inform people because from my own observation, there is very little practical communication coming out from Macedonia to the world to present the issue, especially not in the English language or any other language. So when you read the news about Macedonia and Bulgaria, it is in Macedonian. So the people who who are close to the issue or concerned about the issue, they get the news, but everybody else doesn't. So Goce, please just say a couple of words about yourself and let's get to some of the points of this conversation.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, everyone. My name is Goce Pangovski. As Martin said, I'm a native of Macedonia. I was born there. I lived there. My entire family is still there. I'm currently residing in the United States and have been for the past 15, 16 years. As Martin graciously said, I am more than an enthusiast about history. Shortly, hopefully, I will end up doing a master's degree in history over here in the United States, so which will have to do with Macedonian history, but also obviously the history of the neighboring Balkan nations to Macedonia and Macedonians. To go right into it, as you said, it's unfortunate that not only people do not know even in Europe, let alone the rest of the world, what is going on with Macedonia. It is because most of the information is in the Macedonian language and not much is in English or any other language of the world. As you mentioned, to just give a brief account of what's going on, Macedonia became an independent country in 1991 after it had a referendum on it. Before this part of Macedonia that is now the independent state was part of a federal state that was called Yugoslavia. After that, many political entities in the country, the leading ones who have always formed the government, had and still have the intention to join the EU, which is the European Union, where we, everybody says, naturally belong because of the geographical positioning of Macedonia in Southeast Europe, and because we're already surrounded by at least two EU member states, and that's Greece in the south and Bulgaria to the east. For years, we've been, for lack of a better word, maltreated by Greece to change the name of the country, which was outrageous and unheard of. And now Bulgaria keeps vetoing Macedonia. This is the third or the fourth veto, if I remember correctly. In the capacity of an EU member state, Bulgaria vetoes Macedonia's even not joining, but starting the negotiation process to join the EU.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the European Union brings its decisions, like the decision on enlargement, by unanimous vote. So if one member state thinks otherwise, the union as a whole cannot proceed with the specific agenda for, in this case, beginning negotiations with Macedonia.
Exactly. Yes, that is and has been a big problem. Already many quote unquote older member states of the European Union are at least publicly saying that they're fed up with this system of unanimity needed to start the negotiation process with a candidate state, because obviously, as in the case of Greece and now Bulgaria, they are misusing this right within the European Union to blackmail candidate states into submission to their own wants and needs and their basically national chauvinist requests on their neighboring states to start the negotiation process, which is the case between Bulgaria and Macedonia.
Well, just to interject, some people may ask the question, why would you qualify their demands as nationalistic or chauvinistic? And just to clarify again, well, I'm assuming that there will be, there is a need for a lot of clarification during our conversation, because like I said, Macedonia does not present itself to the world. I mean, the Macedonian government or respective governments have done very little to do that, to tell its side of the story, which is challenged, has been challenged for more than 100 years. So chauvinistic and nationalistic because both Greece and Bulgaria, with their demands, have violated the United Nations principle of self-determination, which is the right to self-determination. So the Macedonian people need to prove and to constantly defend Bulgarian and Greek and other insinuations that the nation has been somehow magically constructed during Yugoslavia. And there is plenty of evidence, and it goes without saying that a nation doesn't become just like that. It takes decades, centuries for it to ferment and to for a group of people, a large group of people, to develop into a nation. So hence this clarification for those that are not familiar with the problem.
Exactly, and it's on one hand it's tragic, but it's kind of comical to try to explain this to people who might not know about Macedonia or Macedonians, or in general people who have not heard of anything like this before. It is tragic and comic at the same time, because these are also Balkan nations who themselves have gone through this process of being denied and having members of their own nations declare in the past that there's something else under pressures of the neighbors, of the church that was in charge in their territory and whatnot. So and being neighboring nations, we kind of know each other very well. So it's that's why we say it's national chauvinistic to ask this of us and not look at themselves, for that matter.
Yeah. In other words, both, before Bulgaria, it was Greece that was delivering demands which were essentially ultimatums. Either you accept this or you're not getting anywhere. Now Bulgaria is doing the same. So it is not far-fetched to understand the fear of many Macedonians in the country, in the state of Macedonia and around the world, that the identity of Macedonians is under threat to be obliterated, so that formally in front of the world, in international documents and protocols and education, the people of the Macedonian people will be like a footnote with all of these explanations, because yes, indeed, these countries, they have their demands for their own reasons, and perhaps maybe we can get into that later on. But we'll try to keep this short and digestible, watchable, because we can talk for hours on this subject. There is a lot of history in it. But what I'm saying is that both Greece and Bulgaria have very good reasons, seen from their own perspective, why they want to challenge the identity of their neighboring country. And it has been going on for more than a century, since I guess the 1850s or 60s.
Yes, to keep it short and simple for the viewers of the world, let's just emphasize the fact that there are no nations in the Middle Ages. There were no nations in antiquity. Nation states or nations at all are a modern phenomenon.
Relatively modern.
Yeah, some say
the Treaty of Westphalia and
past, even at that point, it's still a king and its subjects. Maybe let's say maybe early 19th century and then onwards. And then it ferments into what we now know or have a notion of what constitutes a nation and a nation state. And in that sense, to speak briefly on Greece, Greece objected to Macedonia using its own name of Macedonia, which has been the name of the country and the land, if you will, for centuries, for millennia, because up until 1913, which is the first Balkan War, Greece as a state has never possessed any portion of Macedonia, to be exact. Since 1913, they have the current borders with Macedonia and its north, and they incorporated about 50%, 51% of the historic ethno-geographic land country of Macedonia. Since then, there's this propaganda that Macedonia belongs to Greece, and that not only since that time, but everything before that time in history also belongs to Greece, meaning from Philip II and Alexander the Great, his illustrious greatest warrior king of all time, probably, up until today, they want to claim everything as being Greek as they understand it today, which is absurd. And they managed to, in the bilateral negotiations, have a counterpart in Macedonia as a government to sign a document that will grant them this quote unquote right, which is unheard of. And it's by many accounts not justifiable, not legal, as it should not be as a legal document, because
it's a historic precedent to formally lay claim on the history of another country or nation.
Yes, and I just want to emphasize the fact that there is no bilateral treaty of any sort in the history of time, or between two countries, between two nations, between two kingdoms, if you will, in the past, where you are trying to, in this treaty, what's the word, limit the history of the neighboring nation. Even in times of war, when somebody was conquered and totally obliterated and subjugated as a nation, as a people, this was not done before. Greece managed to do this with our quote unquote Macedonian government, and in that treaty they laid claim on the history of Macedonia from antiquity up until today.
Okay, yeah. So now this is a good point where we can where we can
Switch to Bulgaria.
we can make the switch to Bulgaria and its claims. Bulgaria has vetoed Macedonia 3 times, and so what exactly is why is Bulgaria doing this? I mean, what are its formal arguments for doing this?
To again keep it short, and that's why I spoke about the Greek problem, quote unquote, with Macedonia, is to emphasize the fact that Bulgaria is now being a copycat and trying to do exactly what Greece did, and to put pressure on Macedonia to get its own national frustrations out, if you will, on its neighbor, which is in this case Macedonia and the Macedonians.
Okay, please go say hold your thought, because this concept of a national frustration may sound extremely bizarre to the unskilled observer of politics and international relations. We say national frustrations in terms of identity and history, which is when there is a national frustration, when there has been in the past in Europe particularly, it was because of colonies and influence and trade.
Exactly.
Right? And now we have in this Balkanic example, the cause of these frustrations is how history is interpreted by this or that country. And I will add that and that these 2 countries and now in this case, since Greece got what it wanted with the Prespa agreement, now it's Bulgaria's turn to get what it wants. And what it essentially wants, like Greece, is a perfect, ideal rendition of its own history. So its own history, which also includes the invasion and fighting over the land Macedonia, and the expulsion and subjugation of thousands of people in Macedonia, both on the part of Greece and Bulgaria. And also I should mention Serbia, that Serbia too had its claims on Macedonia. Serbia dispatched thousands of colonists who have become citizens of Macedonia today, which is, that's the world. These people are our neighbors, and we want to live with everybody else, right? We want to live, we want to have cordial relations. However, this needs to be done on their terms, and the Bulgarian terms are that Macedonians don't exist as a nation. Exactly. So how can you have it's one of the principles for enlargement, for EU accession, for new member states, is good neighborly relations. Exactly. What Bulgaria is demanding is the opposite of building good neighborly relations. Bulgaria wants to step on you and wipe the floor with your dignity. And then how can we expect to have nice, decent, civilized conversations with fellow Bulgarians when we go on vacation there, or when they come to visit this place, or for international forums or whatever? How is it possible when Macedonians are in the position to continuously defend and there is no end, there is no light at the end of the tunnel? It's just continuous frustration. So what does Bulgaria want?
I will just interject with one point of what you said before. I didn't want to stop you.
Thank you.
When you said it's history, it's not its history. It's Bulgaria's historical narrative of how they imagine themselves.
Yes, I stand corrected. It is the historical narrative. Yes.
Yes. And to put it bluntly, just like we said earlier, what Greece got with the Prespa agreement, that's what Bulgaria wants to get now from Macedonia in a written document, as in a treaty, and it's using the EU to put pressure on Macedonia to basically blackmail us
And
into submission.
this history begins in medieval times, in the
Yes.
10th century, with the
Well, earlier a little bit.
a little
Yeah.
bit earlier, yes, but with
Yeah.
the arrival of the Bulgaric Turkic tribes
Exactly.
from the
Exactly.
Volga region, I believe, and the institution of the Bulgarian kingdom.
Yes.
So Bulgaria's claim is essentially tied around this historic event.
With Greece getting the antiquity and the time of Philip and Alexander, now Bulgarians want to gain everything from medieval times up until 1944 or 45 is in their narrative. It kind of varies.
Yeah. How does Bulgaria gain that from Macedonia? What is the dynamic of this negotiation? The two countries are negotiating. We failed to mention there are historic commissions. I mean, commissions on history and education, and Bulgaria steps up with demands. And what are some of these demands?
On August 1st, 2017, just as the new government was established in Macedonia, it signed this good neighborly treaty with Bulgaria to say that, among other things, we will do better economic ties and all of that, which is normal and good, and you would want that between two neighboring countries. But in it, it also stipulates that we supposedly have a joint history. Now, if you hear that, if you're anybody in the world, you would think, well, yeah, two neighboring countries, two nations would normally have joint histories because, you know, as you go through the centuries, you obviously have some relations.
Yeah.
Some people of yours go there. Some of theirs come to your place and whatnot, and things are happening that way. No. Bulgaria understands this as everything is Bulgarian history up until 1944, which, to reiterate for our viewers, is the year when Bulgaria stopped being an ally of Hitler and Nazi Germany and switched sides in the war because the Russian Red Army came to its northern borders, and Macedonian partisans were beating them on the ground in Macedonia as being the guerrilla fighters. And then they switched sides, and then they became the liberators of Macedonia again.
But we have to say this quote unquote liberators because they were fighting against, I mean, they were fighting to conquer Macedonia. Exactly. Because we should also know that Bulgaria went to war with Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece were allies in
against the Ottoman Empire.
Balkan War against to drive out the Ottoman Empire from Macedonia, which was the empire's last vestige in the Balkans. And then upon successfully doing that, Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia went to war with one another, or more precisely, Greece and Serbia allied against Bulgaria and
Bulgaria. Yep.
Yeah. So Bulgaria has been trying to, all three countries, went into to conquer Macedonia.
Exactly.
And this is despite numerous pleas on the part of Macedonians in Europe. There were delegations that went to Russia. Delegations went to France and to other countries, and there were Macedonian groups within in the West, and they were pleading for support for Macedonia, for Macedonian nationhood. But I guess the European powers thought otherwise, including Russia.
Exactly.
Russia wasn't interested in enabling a free, independent Macedonian state.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. The Russian Tsar at the time was the arbiter, if you will, of the division of Macedonia between the three neighboring states at that time, which is the First and Second Balkan Wars, 1912, 1913. And then soon after, World War I starts in 1914. It ends in 1918. And what was divided before was basically kept as it was. The only change was that the Strumica region, which is in southeast Macedonia at the moment, was taken from Bulgaria because Bulgaria was allied with Germany in World War I.
So we are continuing on a different platform. So yeah, the arrangement of the interface now is different, but we shall continue nevertheless. Goce, as I can recall, you were saying that Bulgaria was allied with Germany in both World War One and Two.
Yes.
And the outcome of these wars was a loss for Bulgaria twice, and Bulgaria lost Strumica from the Pirin part of the ethnographic region of Macedonia.
Yes. Yes, to Serbia at that point, or the Kingdom of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes in 1919, I think, after the treaties and the peace conferences in Paris. And then after World War II, luckily for it, although they're vehemently denying this, and they're for their own reasoning, they're saying that Soviet Russia occupied them technically. They actually switched sides in the war on the 9th of September in 1944, and pretended or asked the USSR and Tito to join the fight against their former allies, which were the Germans headed by Hitler, which gave him a little clout, a little pass when the treaties for peace were set up in Paris after World War II, by which they kept their country intact, but also it mangled their history into such a interesting position. Why? Because right after the war, their government was pro-communist, pro-USSR. It was allied with Tito's Yugoslavia and the USSR and all of that. And in 1948, when the split in the common form between Tito's Yugoslavia and Stalin's led USSR happened, Yugoslavia was technically ostracized and pushed away from what ended up being the Eastern Bloc countries, which put Bulgaria into their side, or on the side of the USSR, which it used as a potential to again attack Macedonia and its history and its people, and that has been going on since then. So
okay,
yeah.
So just to to reiterate my previous statement that Bulgaria is in a pursuit for a perfect national identity. To countries in the Balkans, this is very important. For what reason, I cannot understand. But this comes with undesired contingencies, like the existence of a people, a nation, whose history you're claiming in order to have that which you want. It's very difficult not to prolong this conversation and get into historic reasons. We have set a very simple and straightforward agenda, but how do we get to it? How do we explain that to everybody else, to people outside Macedonia, and even to argue to people in Bulgaria who are unaware of these details, these aspects of their nation building process, which the country and the government, the official historic narrative wishes to kind of like iron out and make into a nice fitting historic book.
to put it bluntly and as short as possible, Bulgaria wants its historical narrative that includes Macedonia and Macedonians to be all Bulgarian between the Middle Ages and 1944. For them and for their national historical narrative, that's all Bulgarian. There's no Macedonians at all up until 1944.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is how, to present to people who will be watching this how absurd this is and so untrue is, for example, my own grandfather on my father's side was born in 1909. I not only met him, I grew up with him. And he was born way before 1944. He never told me, listen, Sonny, we are not Macedonians. We're something else or whatever, Bulgarians. Mm-hmm. But that never happened. You know, if that was the case, in my own case, in what I know to be my own family history, then I would think twice. But this did not happen. So it's obviously absurd. It's obviously untrue. Like you said in the beginning, how does a nation go to sleep, for example, as one nation, Bulgarian, supposedly,
as having one identity, and wake up with something else?
With something else, yeah.
Yeah, it's a process. Yeah. I mean, you have migrated to the United States. I've spent many years in the United States, and I have felt on my own person the process of giving and accepting something from the new environment, and it takes time. You know, nobody can beat it into you by any mean. And in fact, Bulgaria has done that to Macedonians living in the western part of Bulgaria, which was ethno-geographically Macedonian. There were human rights. Yes, people who fought for human rights, and they ended up in jail. This is in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, yep. And Bulgaria has lost countless. What do you call it?
Human rights, not only
but we're lacking the legal jargon, but Bulgaria has lost, the state of Bulgaria has lost the International Court of Human Rights numerous times because of the repression of Macedonians, and Macedonians there cannot proclaim their ethnic identity. They cannot. They do not get recognized, and numerous attempts to register associations, cultural associations, a political party have been quashed.
Exactly.
Yes, but we're skipping through periods, and then I guess it's okay, but the people will understand, the listeners, the watchers of this video will understand. I'm going to skip to the Middle Ages, when Bulgaria wants to. Has a foot on that period, on that historic period, claiming that, for example, the brothers Cyril and Methodius, who went on numerous missions across Europe. I mean, Middle and Eastern Europe, to spread literacy, essentially. They developed the Glagolithic alphabet, and then their students. They continued their missions, St. Clement and St. Naum. So Bulgaria claims all of these historic figures as Bulgarian. However, I found a very interesting analysis when you look at the appearance of church of frescoes of St. Clement in Bulgaria and Macedonia. In Bulgaria, there are only 2 or 3. Frescoes of St. Clement, and most are in Macedonian monasteries. So this is a thorn in the eye of Bulgarian historians and statesmen and women of the state. Can you cite something else?
Well, Bulgarians gained their name from what are the original Bulgarians. The original Bulgarians were by all accounts, and I'm talking scientific journals and
Historic accounts and evidence, I mean,
Yeah.
scriptures.
which is also admitted by their own Academy of Sciences, is that they were a Turkic Mongolian tribe of sorts in the Middle Ages. That came from somewhere deep in Asia, around the Altai Mountains or something like this. They don't know to this very day where exactly they hailed from. But and often we hear from Bulgarian side that that's almost tantamount to racism from our side, pointing this out, which I've said it in a TV appearance. Why would it be racist? We're all people. It doesn't matter what your past was. And if science proves that this was the original origin of these people, that's what it was. You can't change that. That's in history. So to cut it short, this was original Bulgarians were a Turkic Mongolian tribe. They spoke a language which is akin to the Turkic languages of Asia.
It belonged to the Turkic group of languages, and in my understanding of the arrival of the Bulgar tribes in the Balkans, I mean there were numerous tribes that came from that general region. There were the Kupchaks and the
that's a little bit later, yeah.
The Kumans.
Yes, that's
the Bulgars and so on. This is not the issue. I mean, the world is a tapestry of tribes and identities and so on. This is not the issue, but the issue is that when people in Macedonia, like you said, provoke the question, well, what about the Bulgaric origin? The name of the country is Bulgaria, but Bulgarians claim a Slavic identity.
Exactly.
Which is fine, but then on the other hand, Bulgaria claims that Macedonians are Bulgarians.
Yes.
And I don't see how this works. Because the tribes that settled in Macedonia, they didn't mix with the local population. The Slavic language arose out of somewhere, either south of the Danube River or.
This is the what I call the original sin of the Bulgarian historical narrative. They'd like to impose or superimpose the Bulgarian name on stuff and on people and on languages that were not Bulgarian, were not, as we said, and this is proven not by world academia, but academia within Bulgaria itself, that the original Bulgarians were a Turkic Mongolian tribe that spoke a form of a Turkic language. To all the language for which Saint Cyril and Methodius created the Glagolitic alphabet, which the rest of the world, not just the Slavic nations, call Old Slavonic or Old Church Slavonic, into Old Bulgarian, is not okay. It shows what we talked about earlier. Your national.
Yes, it's not consistent with the historic facts of the Bulgarians speaking a Turkic language. Exactly. And calling the language of these Slavic proselytes Bulgarian when they were Slavic. But yes, I understand that. The way I imagine the arrival of the Bulgar tribes in Romania, they went through Romania and Bulgaria, and they made incursions into Macedonia and then other parts, and then arguably Serbia. But they eventually it was a group of a limited number. They were all warriors, and they absorbed into the domicile population, which I would be mistaken to call it purely Slavic because we don't quite know the specific dynamics. There were different peoples and then possibly remnants of Thracian. Groups and Tribalians and so on and Dacians, and they were morphed into this very strong Slavic element, and then the Bulgars they became morphed into the Slavic element. But they originally the kings were called Hans.
Exactly.
The Bulgarian Hans. They weren't tsars or knyazes as the old Slavonic rulers were called.
They do have typically Turkic tribal warrior, not names, but titles, as Tarkhan, as and these. I've read, for example, accounts from China at a Chinese university that say the Gokturk, which is some kind of other Turkic tribe that lived on the outskirts of China. There's some accounts from the Middle Ages that they used the same title, Tarkhan, which Bulgars used when they came to the Balkans. That's what history is, that we learn about stuff. But to superimpose that onto the Slavic and the like you said, the domicile, other substratum of people that were here already, problem. That's the problem. That's that national frustration being extrapolated onto other people.
Okay, but let's fast forward to the 19th century, when this is a time of great upheaval in the Balkans and in Macedonia. Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece had gained its independence with the help of foreign powers. Russia, namely, Austria, Britain, France, and so on. But Macedonia didn't, and I blame geography for that. But there was a native movement. There were several uprisings against the Ottoman Turks. But the major uprising, which, maybe we should record another episode for another lecture on this subject. The major uprising, the St. Elijah Day uprising, it took place in the ethno-geographic land of Macedonia, not in Bulgaria. Bulgaria claims this is a former Bulgarian claim in the negotiations, and it is one of the conditions to Macedonia's accession to the EU that Macedonia needs to call this uprising. It had a Bulgarian character. However, Bulgaria is a free state with its own king and with its own standing army, does not send a single soldier on Macedonian soil to help these supposed Bulgarians, right?
Exactly.
So this is another absurdity on the part of
not only that, but
of the modern Bulgarian state,
but under the basically command of the Russian Tsar at the time and the Russian foreign minister who visited Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria at the time, prior to the uprising. We're talking about 1903, just for the viewers. They started arresting Macedonian revolutionaries in Sofia and in Bulgaria, interning them, putting them into prisons, and physically closing the border. Some of our most famous revolutionaries at the time are saying that they're trying to pay money to gain arms and ammo from them, but they sell them the guns but no ammo, or vice versa. At the time of the uprising, literally rivers of blood are being spilled in Macedonia. Numerous attacks and the reprisals of the Ottoman Empire and what were called the Bashibozuks, which was the irregular militia, mostly consisted of Albanians and whatnot, are doing vicious reprisals on the Macedonians in Macedonia to subdue the uprising. The Bulgarian state is not doing anything. There's no military action. There's nothing. And their Tsar, Ferdinand at the time, went to his native Germany for a vacation.
Right. Yeah. So this is Goce. I can't help it but come to the conclusion that in those times, the European powers, they sold the Macedonian people to the animals, to all the auxiliary soldiers and to the Ottoman army who were committing reprisals, and thousands of people were executed. So
in different terms, that's what's happening today.
Yeah, yeah. So it's happening again. I'm coming to the same conclusion that Europe is selling Macedonia again. The Macedonian people. Thankfully, there's no violence and reprisals taking place now. But this is a different form of torture. It's the Macedonian people are anguished. They're suffering, and I know that a lot of people are suffering. They're saying like how do you how do you come to an understanding of this situation where you have to argue, convince some thirds, forces, powers that your dignity is being suffocated, is being quashed out of you, while in the meantime you read in the media and you watch on the news that what our neighboring country is asking, these outright lies. I mean, it's there is no other way to say this. This is a lie. It's a lie. What Bulgaria is doing is lying first to its own people, and they're lying to Europe, and Europe is buying the lie. I don't know how much the Macedonian state has, Macedonian diplomacy has done to present the Macedonian claim, but nevertheless, Bulgarian terms are part of the negotiation process. History has become part of the negotiation process.
Well, just to explain to our viewers why you're using such strong terminology and why it is
strong. It is undiplomatic, but yes. let's call the thing for what it is.
Why is this? The fact is that no other nation, no other country has been submitted to this, to join the EU. And I've said this numerous times. I'll repeat it time and again. Macedonia and Macedonians do not want anything special. We don't want anything above and beyond what the others are getting. But we also do not want to be getting anything less. Whatever was the case for Bulgaria itself to join the EU, for Romania, for whatever other country and nation, that's what we want for ourselves. And that is meet the economic criteria, meet the legislative criteria, have freedoms, have freedom of speech and all that, and whatever the European Union supposedly stands for. But don't give me these obstacles and outright blackmail to change my own history, to put in the negotiation treaties and paperwork that supposedly my own language is not my own, that I have to put a footnote to explain what Macedonian language means and whatnot. That's not okay. No other country or nation has ever gone through this. Why should we? Mm-hmm. And like you said, the struggle now of Bulgaria is to put in its own criteria, its own historical narrative, its own view of the Macedonian language into the paperwork of the European Union. So hide behind it because it is a member state, and say that these are all preconditions for Macedonia to start the negotiations to join in the EU. And that's where we are right now. After 2 or 3 vetoes, now it came to terms where France is the current president of the rotating presidency.
He holds the presidency of the EU.
Mm-hmm. And again, there was a summit and big talks about the enlargement process and all of that with the countries of the Western Balkans, as they call it, which is again kind of a derogatory term for we are all different countries and nations.
Yeah, but they want to segment everything I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, your argument is on spot, but
Obviously, the EU itself has a lot of problems of its own with the war between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it gave a candidate status to Ukraine at the moment, a country in shambles. I mean, I'm very sorry for what is going on there right now. People are suffering, people are dying.
absolutely.
The country being destroyed day by day. And this has, we can't even see the end of it. And they're given some kind of a candidate status to start joining the EU, and Macedonia is not. We're waiting years to start the negotiations. We're not waiting to join. We're waiting to start the negotiations.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Goce, I want to, make a full disclosure of how I see the specifics in terms of the negotiation. In terms of the EU expansion in regards to Macedonia, which is coupled with Albania. The governments of Macedonia, the courts, the economy, corruption, and so on. These are not strong suits on the part of Macedonia, right? I mean, Macedonia has to do work in this regard. However, when you make the historic claims as lodged by Bulgaria, when you make these part of the negotiating criteria, then you're pushing the country to backslide on corruption,
Exactly.
and everything else.
Exactly.
And the political dynamics in Macedonia. I mean, there is very little unity on the issue of the Macedonia-Bulgaria problem negotiation between the two major political parties.
Completely that Macedonia has a lot of problems with corruption, with ineffective legislature, and
good governments, and then too many things. I mean,
but
it's not fixed.
The European Union itself has a lot of problems.
It's not a perfect entity.
Exactly.
And then there is a lot of different winds coming from different directions, and a lot of challenges to that different countries are facing, and the union as a political entity as a whole. However, Europe is not going to be wholesome without even the smallest country in the Balkans, and we're talking about Macedonia and Montenegro and Kosovo and Serbia and Bosnia, the entire so-called Western Balkans. So when Macedonia has been given a candidate status for 17 years, it's ridiculous to, how long is this going to go for, unless, I'm pretty sure that there is a bigger picture to see in this regard. I mean, Macedonia does feel the compunction to work fast and join the EU, and maybe this the concessions that are made to Bulgaria are part of that dynamic. However, at what cost?
Let's put this.
The red lines have been crossed. The Macedonian language, for example,
many times. And to put this in perspective for our viewers, for example, in the United States, maybe, or somewhere else, we're talking about a country that at the moment has barely 2 million people. 2 million people are the problem for the EU. That's like a neighborhood or one portion of like London or Paris or something like that.
Yeah, well, London is not in the EU anymore, but I see your point.
And guess why? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll not go there, but
yeah. But you're right. To put in official negotiation papers, to start the talks to join the EU, stuff like your language will be with an explanatory footnote of how a member state of the EU views it and denies it, basically, or that you have to add stuff about your history because the neighboring country dictates it to you, that's unacceptable. And if we had anybody with any sense in our government, they would outright not reject it, but cry out to the world and say, this is outrageous. This is, you're basically a corrupt union if you're going to allow this.
Let's call it faulty, because we know it's imperfect, and corrupt maybe is a bit a strong word in this regard. But I see. So do you think the Commissioner for Enlargement, the Hungarian emissary Oliver Varhelyi, he himself said that there was a very strong and troubling statement to the delight of Bulgaria, that all of Bulgaria's concerns are accepted, and that we are fighting for a stronger union, and so on and so forth. So I mean, this is only speculative, but diplomacy behind closed doors, how easy is it to influence somebody in position of power to lean towards, not on the right side of history in respect to Macedonia.
Within a few days, Bulgaria gains this so-called proposition from the French government, basically, and from President Macron in the position of leading the EU at the moment, being at the helm of the presidency of the EU. And in this document, about 30 pages, they, not outright, but within the pages of this document, all of the concerns or these national chauvinistic requests by Bulgaria are incorporated towards Macedonia. And not only that, their government falls apart there, supposedly because not all their requests were met, but their parliament voted on this document, and supposedly because they didn't gain everything that they wanted, one of their coalition members in their government resigns. There were some talks that it's because of some corruption scandal, whatnot. We don't know. But the rest of the Bulgarian parties, including the ones that are in their opposition, like the previous Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, accepts the French proposition as good for Bulgaria. Their president, Rumen Radev, who is usually like the worst of the, he's the most outspoken representative of Bulgarian national chauvinism towards Macedonia and Macedonians, he also accepted the French proposal as good for Bulgaria. And they voted it in their parliament on the 24th, which is a few days ago. In the meantime, Oliver Varhelyi, which is the commissioner for enlargement of the EU, the European Council, gives a statement in public, I think it was on Twitter, where he says that all of Bulgaria's concerns are met, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
or accepted.
Yes, and Macedonia in the meantime says no publicly. Our prime minister went to Brussels, I think, and said no to the French proposal. But the correct statement of what he actually said there was, we don't accept this form of the French proposal. So it's kind of, but it's kind of not really a no, if you know. And I hope our viewers will understand. Immediately after, President Macron of France, who is the current standing president of the EU, gives a statement in which he says yes, we are working towards meeting all the Bulgarian wants and needs, and we will continue working with the North Macedonians.
Yes. Yep.
He called us North Macedonians, although supposedly we were not supposed to be ever called that by the Prespa agreement with Greece. And how absurd is this? Instead of him apologizing and correcting himself in public, so we have a statement where he would say, I apologize for making that statement. You are Macedonians. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Buya Osmani, gives a statement in which he says President Macron didn't mean that. That was a slip of tongue.
Yeah. Well, Goce, you can't possibly expect the President of France to issue an apology because the statement was intentional.
Yes.
And also intentional was the statement of the Bulgarian Prime Minister.
Yes.
You know, so who also called the Macedonian people North Macedonians. I mean, the Macedonian nation, North Macedonians. So you know, it's.
If you don't mind, to finish with Oliver Varhelyi, who's the commissioner for enlargement, he further made statement that now, because Bulgaria has voted in its parliament to accept the French proposal, which is terrible, but it meets all the Bulgarian wants and needs and requests of Macedonia, including our language and the history and all that. He gave a statement that now that there are no other limits and Bulgaria accepted, now North, for quote unquote Macedonia, should continue the process, and there's no limits for it to start negotiations with the EU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. You know, all of this is to the unexperienced, uninduced novice observer of Balkan or Macedonian issues. This sounds like so much to take in and then to piece together, to have an understanding. So it's my question is to you is what is the EU's tacit, unspoken position on the Macedonia-Bulgaria issue? I mean, they have, speaking from the capacity of president, of the chair of the presidency of the EU, French President Macron calls the Macedonian nation North Macedonians. So does the Bulgarian Prime Minister, and members of the Bulgarian Parliament hold up signs saying Macedonia is Bulgarian. This is from the legislative house of a nation, of a neighboring state, in Europe. In Europe, this is what is this if not territorial aspirations?
Exactly.
On behalf of Bulgaria, and this doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's appalling, to see this happen in 21st century Europe, and then I think Europe knows its weaknesses. They cannot command Bulgaria to play accordingly. Well, we can argue on that. I mean, they can, but they don't want to, because of many different reasons. My question to you is, can you give me your opinion? What does the EU simply want Macedonia to accept Bulgaria's terms, bow its head and begin negotiations, while trampling its own principles? United in our difference, all of this, from this perspective, seems like a farce. And Bulgaria has constructed many, this historic narrative that doesn't stand. It doesn't stand in front of an objective view of history, and then Europe is setting a precedent in trampling its own principles.
In
Um,
in the shortest
can you comment?
in the shortest possible way, yes, that's what they want. They, just like in World War II, just like prior in World War I, the Balkan Wars, the so-called great powers of the world, the European Union as a whole, the biggest member states there are showing time and again that they don't want to deal with Macedonia and Macedonians according to the principles that they supposedly stand for.
Mm-hmm.
They just want this issue to be over, just get it over with. Most of them don't even care.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
if there was,
I can see that.
they stood to the side and say, all of them, Bulgaria, stop this. You cannot do this to a neighboring state, whether you are a member of the EU or not, or whatever. Not to mention that both Macedonia and Bulgaria are member states of NATO now, and we know how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and to hold up signs in your national parliament to say that the neighboring country is yours, just like you say, that's not a electoral aspiration of some lunatic professor or
Well, I did the Bulgarian foreign ministry issue some kind of a note on this. It not that I recall, it didn't. So it's not like this. They can say, oh, this was a group of radical nationalist, ultra-nationalist MPs, but nevertheless, you can issue a formal statement saying that, but there was no statement.
Try doing that in, for example, I don't know, Germany. Mm-hmm. Let small fringe party lift up signs in the German parliament to say France is German. See what happens. That's tantamount to war. That's a war declaration.
Yeah.
In any reasonable terms, that's what it means.
Yeah. Okay. Goce, can you please tell me, Bulgaria is, let's say, let's suppose Bulgaria is appeased with, Macedonia accepts their demands. What happens next? Is there does this inherently bring more trouble for Macedonia because now you've given up, you've left down your guard, you're no longer negotiating, you're accepting, and is there an end, a light at the end of the tunnel, to use the same that expression again, and can, once we've become member state, can the Macedonian people reassert their ethnicity, their identity, and so on? Formally and both informally. Can the EU sanction a group of people who say,
I don't know about that, but I don't think anybody, including me, would want for it to come to pass. Because, as I say, this is tantamount to a declaration of war without actually firing a single bullet. They're gaining onto Macedonian sovereignty and nationhood and self-determination foothold by both Greece and Bulgaria without actually having to go to war, because a Macedonian government is signing these documents. We can discuss whether it's a formally elected government and how that all happened and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of the world, if they come up with the information that a Macedonian government signed these documents, and everybody with a semblance of any rational thought in their head will say to you, well, what do you want? Your own government signed this. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. For it not to come to that. If it does, in any normal, quote unquote, country in the world, this will mean civil war between those who vehemently oppose this, which by all accounts we all know is the majority of the Macedonians, versus the ones who are put into power to basically go through this agenda and say yes to whatever any neighbor is asking for. Just to reiterate of what you said before, the aspirations are also from Serbia and Albania. If, for example, Serbia was into EU prior to Macedonia, I bet you that we're going to be similar troubles. We are now neighboring countries, and we have good relations with Serbia and all that, but don't sleep on that year, ever, especially in the case of Macedonia and Macedonians. Albania, so if they go and join the EU, seeing what Bulgaria and Greece have done to Macedonia and what they have gained through this process, they will do the same. So succumbing to a bully is not a way out. That's not the light at the end of the tunnel. To be blunt, to be quite honest, and it's been said by many Macedonians, you know, if you act like a prostitute, people will treat you as one. You know, and this is the problem, is that the people who are in power in our government are acting like that, not in their own personal lives. If you want to act like this in your own personal life, that's your own problem. You're elected or put into these positions to defend the national interest of Macedonia and all of its citizens, primarily to the core of the nation, which is the Macedonians, the ethnic Macedonians. That's why this country exists.
Yeah. Well, you know, Macedonia is a multicultural country, and
anyone else, everyone else.
And in that respect, one of the more normal multicultural countries. Whereas I'll use the example of Bulgaria again. In Bulgaria, there is only one national identity, and that's the Bulgarian national identity. Everybody else, if you're a Roma, a Turk, you know, a Macedonian, and so on, a Pomak, you know, the Muslims with a Bulgarian national consciousness, you know, you are something else in your home, but you're Bulgarian. You know, there is a blanket on top of everybody. Everybody's Bulgarian, but in Macedonia we have ethnic political parties, as you know, and I think the country is more democratic. You know, it's very diversity can represent an advantage. You know, but in a more sane world, in a world with principles where you know, your neighbors don't use this against you.
Exactly. That's where the paradox comes from. We are more democratic. We are, in fact, more democratic and more accepting of differences and all that. But we are being pushed aside and asked to do stuff that nobody else does. So if instead of us getting ahead and saying, look, these neighboring countries are the ones who have trouble. I mean, Greece does not accept that there's Turks in its territory. It holds back to some treaty from 1923 or something like that, that it calls them Muslims. They're Turks.
Yeah. Yes.
This is ridiculous. We're in the 21st century, third decade of the 21st century, and we're dealing with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think we should wrap it up, but on what note? What is your advice to Macedonians living abroad or in the country? How should people position themselves against all of this?
We live in these difficult times for Macedonia and Macedonians, and we should do our utmost wherever we live in the world, whether we're in the Republic or outside of it, to unite on the principles of defending our national interests, in the sense of, like I said before, we don't want anything more than what other nations have gotten in this process of joining the EU, but we don't accept anything less. Period. That should be our, position. wherever we are in the world. And we should create a situation where no one who does not represent or stand behind this principle will ever be elected as a some kind of the head of the local county office, let alone the government positions in the cabinet, the ministers, or in the national parliament. We cannot anymore. We shouldn't have so far, but we cannot anymore accept any such behavior, because if you're not up to the task, step aside. There are other people who will show you how it's done and who will be able to say no to outrageous, absurd requests from these neighboring countries, backed up by the EU or whatever bigger union or power of the world. I think that's what we should be doing.
Okay. One of the consequences of this anguish of decades spent in this national commiseration of being a Macedonian, being Macedonians, witnessing how others treat you, and then others speak on your behalf, and so on. One of the consequences is people are resigned, and when the people become resigned, when the people become resignated, emotionally, psychologically, they lose their fighting spirit, and this is a gain for everybody who doesn't like there to be a Macedonian people. So, some words of wisdom from you, please. How should we accept this? How do we preserve this fighting spirit to preserve the identity, history, to defend it? I'm sorry for interrupting, but I want just to emphasize, this is a principle of natural, inalienable right of self-determination.
Exactly.
If they wipe out your identity, if you don't have the right to identify yourself within a larger group, even if it's a small tribe, then you're an individual, which in a meta-political sense, that is what we are, but we're not quite there yet, evolutionary terms. But if how do we bounce back as a nation?
I know it's hard. I know a lot of people, especially the young people, would like to be doing other stuff and enjoying life and not be bothered by history or anything like that. But we are who we are. If we renounce, like you say, or let others wipe our identity, that will not help. In the long run, you will still lose. This will not end. As I said earlier, if you succumb to a bully, the bully will not stop, because they'll see that they can gain from you stuff that they usually shouldn't be able to if you don't stand up. But if you stand up, that won't happen. And I find solace and I find inspiration in the fact that this is not the first time Macedonians have gone through this. It's the foreseeable, in the recent memory, in the memory of our parents and our grandparents, we all have stuff and stories, personal stories that they have gone through that are on many accounts worse than what we're going through now. And they stood by, and they suffered through it, and they managed to pass on their knowledge of who we are to us. So it's on our generations now to do the same. I'm
going to interject. Please hold your thought. But there has been a war. There have been wars in Macedonia with brief intermissions of a couple of decades, like we said before, the uprisings, the Ilinden uprising, the Kresna before that uprising, and all of these uprisings have been met with repercussions, with reprisals, with torture, and I mean, if you're a Macedonian, if you have relatives who've, I'm jumbling up my thoughts, but many people have heard what has happened to the people at the hands of I'm not going to name, all the foreign armies, and all the adversarial groups and bands, because, I'm not going to put everybody in the same basket, right? There were many Turks living in Macedonia, and they were friendly with the Macedonians. By the way, I think you're muted. Just check your microphone. Yeah. So there has been, Balkan War 1 and 2, world wars, and then the communist purge of Macedonian nationalists from the country. And I came to an observation. I was looking at the cover of a long play of a vinyl record, because they used to press those of these big bands, essentially, in different towns in Macedonia, and I'm looking at the people. I'm looking at these musicians, and they all have small bodily frames, and come to think of it, seeing pictures from my own family, and recalling the appearance of the elders from back in the day, from several generations ago. All of them were malnourished.
Yeah, true.
They were all they had very little food. They were starved. They were starving basically for decades. For decades, these people were starving. And now we're living in a time of plenty. I don't know how good that this is, with all the sugar drinks and the chips and so on, and the meat. But at least we're not starving. Knock on wood today. So the Macedonian people has come a long way in this past century, and giving up now, to allow
would be
your let's say semi-traditional enemy in Bulgaria, which now Bulgaria is playing the role of an enemy to Macedonia. This is not a friendly country. A friendly country does not do this.
Exactly.
The Albanians in Macedonia have more empathy with the Macedonian people, to an extent. Unlike the people in Bulgaria, we haven't seen a public, the voice of the public, of the Bulgarian people, to say, wait a minute, not in my name. There are a lot of Macedonians, I mean, people, Bulgarians of Macedonian origin, but they have been put in this, ethno-nationalistic machine that doesn't allow this, double a sense of a, shared identity.
That's the problem with I would say now even traditional Bulgarian dichotomy of sorts. You are our brothers. We are the same. No, we're not. Okay, then the Albanians will destroy you. May Macedonia burn. May you be destroyed and nothing and obliterated. Wait a minute. I thought we were brothers. Why are you acting?
Yeah. You're dealing with Bulgarian internet trolls often, and you're familiar with the language and the comments they leave on YouTube videos and Macedonian music videos and so on. Yes, we're a brotherly nation, but however, you're a Yugo communist or Serbian communist and so on. Goce, I think we should wrap it up. We can go on, but for the end, I want to read an inventory of statements that I think we should leave it there. These were written down by former VMRO MP Ilija Dimovski, to credit him for compiling this. He didn't invent it, but he did go through the effort of putting this together. So he has questions for the Bulgarians those that challenge the identity, the right to self-determination for the Macedonian people. So these are his questions. Number one, which language did the Bulgars speak when they arrived in the Balkans? Number two, how do you call your language Bulgarian when it is not Bulgarian? It has a Slavic root and origin instead of Bulgarian. Was your first kingdom Slavic or Bulgarian in identity and origin? Number four, is your cultural and civilizational origin Slavic, Thracian, Mysian, or Bulgarian? Is your second kingdom Slavic or Vlachic? Number six, didn't your revolutionaries proclaim that they were the descendants of Alexander the Great? I'm not familiar on this, but apparently there has been something like this. Maybe it has been evidented. Number seven, didn't the larger part of the population in Bulgaria proclaim a Greek identity until the 1850s and Serbian identity in the northwest of the country, according to the Turkish census books? Number eight, I shouldn't go with this entire list, but it is a challenge for any Bulgarian nationalist to respond to these. So I will translate them and include them in the video description so that people can refer to these and maybe adjust their views, their understanding accordingly, maybe assume a more friendly approach in regard to Macedonia so that we can cultivate good neighborly relations as they ought to be cultivated and not in this way, in the current way of the Bulgarian government and political parties. Something for the end?
I'd like to just thank you for the opportunity. I hope many people, English speakers of the world and people who understand English would see this and understand and maybe even reach out. We can, I think both me and you are open to discussions, to friendly and open discussions about everything and anything, including our Macedonian history or whatever, especially these relations between Macedonia and its neighboring countries and nations like Greece and Bulgaria. And I'd like to reiterate the fact that, or the pledge, my own, and I see yours as well, and spread it to the rest of the Macedonians, whether they're still within Macedonia or anywhere in the world, to not give up, because it will not give them any, they will not gain anything from it. Actually, they might end up being worse off. And to just once and for all stand in opposition to these ridiculous, absurd requests and stand our ground, and so we can see Macedonia really be prosperous for the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Goce, thank you very much for dedicating the time and the patience to go through one hurdle placed by Zoom and another glitch coming from in Skype. So thank you so much, and let's hope that we've been clear and intelligible with piecing the puzzle around the troubles facing Macedonia and its people today, Macedonians and all of our fellow citizens. So thank you, and we shall meet again, Goce. Okay, goodbye.